And 5, 4, 3, 2,
1. Hi, and welcome back to the second episode of Behind the Mask. My name is Richard Glazer. I'm here with John Gallante, the president and assigner for the Tri-State Elite Umpires Association. John, because we're located up here in the Northeast and through the months of January, February, and March, obviously we're subject to some very bad weather, which doesn't allow us any opportunity whatsoever to get out on the baseball field. And the question that arises is, how do you manage to train over 300 people
twice
in the course of these next few months and get everybody trained, evaluated, regardless of the number of years that they've been working or their own personal skill levels?
Yeah, there's a couple. Anybody who's in umpiring or umpires long enough knows that you normally think that spring starts in March, but it really doesn't. So you got December, January, February, March, and then even April is sometimes inclement. So we've been really fortunate to have a lot of organizations, colleges, and high schools to work with over the course of this time, and indoor facilities to go with those programs, so we can get guys involved in calling balls and strikes, outs and safes with real high-level players. So we've got Scanzano Sports in Cherry Hill that has a beautiful facility with top-level talent on their travel baseball teams, so we can see live pitchers from them. Cumberland County College, one of the top junior colleges in the country at the Division III level, and their coach Keith Gorman invites us down every winter. And then Highland High School, Camden Catholic High School, et cetera, et cetera. So we have the very rare privilege of having all these resources at our disposal. That brings us to how many training sessions it actually takes to get 300 guys through twice. So once we hit, about mid-January to February, we're training almost every day, depending on the time and location. So it's a very rigorous schedule, but it's something I enjoy, and I know the guys that help me with it enjoy it as well.
Speaking of which, who helps you with the training? It's not something you do entirely by yourself.
No, it would be impossible to do by myself. But Kurt Widener, top NCAA umpire, who's in our organization as a mechanic instructor. Jerry Wilgus, another guy who's a top NCAA umpire who does a lot of our mechanics instructions. So those guys are as dedicated as I am to this, and just want to see umpires get better. It's really healthy and helpful to have guys like that around.
Okay, so once you get everybody in the room, and you're probably talking, maybe a couple dozen people.
Yeah, we try to cap it somewhere between 15 and 18 per session.
Give me a little bit of a breakdown as to how this training session opens up, and what's the first thing you do? And I know you're addressing the group, but then you break down into different areas.
I try to start every session with some common goals that we can try to work on throughout the session, rather than just looking at each guy and seeing what they're doing wrong. Usually, if you've had 3 months off sitting on the couch all winter, you probably have some issues with your timing and tracking the baseball and getting back comfortable with an 85 mile per hour fastball being thrown at your face. So we usually try to set the standard as, let's simplify this, let's go back to basics at least at the beginning, get used to tracking pitches again all the way into the mitt, taking our time, some things about using the reference points of the catcher, which I think we're going to get into later as far as the strike zone goes. But even guys that have been doing this for a very long time, we still start at square one again and build back up, albeit at a much faster rate. But we start at square one to work our way back to being comfortable again with calling balls and strikes.
What would you say if you had to pick two things that you like to emphasize when you're dealing with these people? And again, you're dealing with people who have been umpiring maybe 10, 15, 20 years.
Specifically on the plate, you mean?
Plate, and then later you shift over to some base work.
Yeah, with the plate, we talk a lot about timing, obviously, getting a optimal view of the strike zone, which would require you to be in the slot, which is the point in between the batter and the catcher, that sort of space in between the two of them, which is not only the best place to view the strike zone, but it's also the safest place to avoid getting drilled in the face with a foul tip.
And a single.
Big White Sox. Oh, my.
That's one. And then two, I know we teach it a little bit differently than some organizations, but the the definition of the strike zone and sort of using an easier reference point than the batter's knees and the midway point between the belt and the underarms of the hitter. That's the rule book defined strike zone. But we teach a lot, especially in the early days of training or reacclimating ourselves to calling balls and strikes, using the reference points of the catcher, not the batter. This way it's easier to track the baseball. And you'll notice if you ever see a batter get into a box, his knees roughly line up with the catcher's knees, and the top of his strike zone is generally the top of the catcher's mask. So if we can go back to square one and simplify it where the catcher is catching the baseball, all of a sudden our timing improves and we stop making egregious mistakes like calling a curveball that bounces the strike, because we can clearly see the movement of the catcher's glove and how that relates to the strike zone.
John, you mentioned the term reference points. Exactly what are the reference points that you introduce?
Okay, so let's assume for this example that a catcher, we're having an advanced catcher who's sitting right down the middle of the plate. Okay, his 4 reference points would be what? It would be his knees, okay, so the catcher's knees, the catcher's 2 shoulders, and the top of his mask. So if you take all 4 of those reference points, they actually coincide pretty closely with the 4 edges of the strike zone, inside, outside, top, and bottom. So especially when you're starting off, when you're rebuilding or recalibrating to start a new season, or maybe you're having an off day behind the plate in the middle of July, going back to the basic framework of the catcher. So if this is the outside shoulder of the catcher, and he's sitting right down the middle, if he catches a ball right here, that has to be outside, right? Because his shoulder's lined up with the outside corner. And same thing, if the top of my mask is right where the top of the strike zone is and I go above my head, that takes a lot of pressure off me, and I can completely rule that pitch is a ball based on where the ball's being caught, and I don't really have to go back and use the difficult framework of the batter. I mean, it's very difficult to keep your eyes on the pitch and the batter's reference points. It's easier to keep your eyes on the pitch and the catcher's reference points.
Okay, now once you've defined the reference points, where do you position the umpire?
Well, here's something really interesting. We always position them in the slot, which is between the batter and the catcher, like we said, on the inside corner. So you're always going to be positioned on the inside corner, and you're always going to keep your head above the catcher's mask. We really want to sit basically like the top of the catcher's mask is like the some water that we have to keep our chin above so we can breathe. If we ever dip below the catcher's mask, that means that there's some obstruction with the catcher's body. Okay, so what's really interesting, though, about the reference points is you'll never be able to use the reference points to your advantage if you don't have proper timing. So if you're deciding on a pitch before it actually hits the glove, you can't use my reference points tip because it never even reached that reference point. So you've got to see the ball go into the glove stop moving, and then render a decision.
Okay, now you mentioned the term slot.
Yep.
Because some umpires, particularly people who haven't ever umpired before, they just think the normal position is to line up directly behind the catcher. But you emphasize a position in the so-called slot. What is the rationale for being in the slot?
I would say it's the best place to view the pitch, for accuracy, and it's also the best place not to get a concussion. So if you're interested in concussions, I would say get right down the middle of the plate, and then you're probably going to have some issues seeing the actual the plate, the bottom of the zone. We're trying to take the catcher out of the mix as an obstruction point for you to see. If you're sitting right behind his head, when the ball is down in the zone, we're not going to be able to track the pitch anymore. So we're trying to get to a point in between the batter and the catcher on the inside corner so we can see clearly the inside corner all the way down to the low outside part of the zone by being over top of the catcher to see around him rather than seeing through him. It's impossible to see through him.
Okay, so initially, what seems to be the biggest error that the umpires make before they actually have been so-called fine-tuned in their position and understanding of the reference points?
Usually timing is the biggest issue, but timing is basic and it's also advanced because, if Kurt, Jerry, and I evaluate each other in the first, we get behind the plate in a session because we have a college game coming up or something like that. Timing's usually the thing we're talking about, so it's not like riding a bike, or at least initially anyway. Once you get back there and you haven't called a pitch for 3 months, you're going to have some timing issues depending on how severe they are, is based on how, your experience level and how long you've been umpiring. But the patience to allow the pitch to travel before you render a decision is probably the most important thing in umpiring at a mechanics level that you can talk about at any level of umpiring.
At this point, we have the advantage of going to a video clip which was recorded recently at one of the training sessions.
Yeah, what we're looking at here is, this is an advanced clinic with veteran umpires who've been doing this for a long time that still need some fine-tuning with some advanced mechanics. What we're talking about here is when our guys are getting set in the box how we want them, and we have guys that are calling strikes out to their side, which is generally how advanced umpires would do it. It's really important to clear the catcher. We say clear the catcher in relation to our right foot. When our right foot is directly behind the catcher's back, and we don't step back with our right foot to call this strike call or strike three that's going on right there, we could interfere with a steal a second, with a steal a third, and when the catcher's arm comes back, we're going to have umpire interference if we don't clear the catcher with our right leg. So, very, very important topic, and umpire interference is not a call you want to get in the habit of being really good at making because you want to get the hell out of the catcher's way.
Right. That clip that we just looked at is from one of our advanced clinics. How would you define an advanced clinic versus a clinic intended for brand new cadet umpires?
Well, the first thing about the advanced clinic, it's very, very new to what we do. We just started in August, so this is our second advanced clinic. The best way to describe the advanced clinic is, number one, it's completely voluntary. So we're not forcing anyone to come. This is presented as an option. Umpires have to pay out of their own pocket to attend, so we can support the facilities and the instructors and all the intangibles that go with it. And also, we don't cover, elementary levels of umpire mechanics. We talk about things like clearing the catcher that we just talked about. We talk a little bit about redefining the strike zone for ourselves and how to deal with high-level baseball games at the perfect game level, and some of these umpires are looking for advancement in NCAA baseball. So what we asked them on the first day, which you were a part of, what are your umpiring goals short-term and long-term? Are you trying to become a Division I umpire? If so, your advanced training is going to be a little more rigorous than a guy who's just looking to get himself on a two-man game at 14U. So we have to cater the clinic to the umpires and what their goals are, but it's very, very, I would say, harsh in terms of the way we evaluate. If it's not good enough, it's not good enough. There's one right way to do it, and there's a lot of wrong ways. So we've got to get everybody on the same page and getting where they want to go. And I take that very seriously, and so do our instructors. You want to go to college baseball, here's what you have to do to get there. And thankfully, out of the August clinic, our first ever advanced clinic, we had 8 umpires accepted in NCAA baseball. So it was effective.
A couple seconds ago, you made reference to the perfect game. Give us, like a definition, explanation of what is perfect game.
A perfect game is the largest baseball scouting service and tournament company in the country. So it's evolved to the point where all of these top round picks in the MLB, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, all these guys are perfect game products at some point or another. If you want to be seen, if you want to play against the best of the best and see how you really stack up with the rest of your peers, and if you are truly elite, if you don't play a perfect game, you're sort of kidding yourself at this point. So it is a unbelievable organization to work for, and with this massive expansion, it's very exciting about what's going on right now.
What is our exact relationship to perfect game as an umpire group?
Well, originally we were subcontracted out. That's the way the contracts were drawn up. We worked for Perfect Game Super 25 out of Vineland. Now it's transitioned to Perfect Game National is expanding not only in South Jersey and the Vineland and Atlantic City area, but Allentown, Pennsylvania, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Edison, New Jersey, Staten Island, New York. So I've taken on a much larger role in running the umpires in the Northeast, and we have to now cover ground in areas that are a little foreign to us. So it's been an exciting offseason in trying to lay the groundwork for umpires in that area A, to evaluate them, B, to meet them and sort of get to know them and tweak them to what we deem the perfect game standard. And over the course of the 3 years that we've worked with Perfect Game, they sort of respect what we consider the standard for Perfect Game. So it's been very enjoyable to work with them, and quite honestly an honor.
Up till now, we've been basically servicing the Perfect Game in South Jersey.
Right.
But now they've expanded to other areas. How have you managed, restructured the organization so as to identify umpires who could go to those locations?
Yeah, it's been a busy off season, and it's been a challenge, but something that's been exciting to take on. We've used social media a lot. We've used contact with local assigners in those areas like Allentown and Elizabeth. And when you mention Perfect Game, sort of everybody's ears go up. They understand that this is top level, the best amateur baseball in the country. So umpires in these areas, instead of fighting the process, want to join this elite level of baseball and be a part of it. So any umpire worth their salt is going to want to work the highest level baseball possible. So as you know, we've set up all types of evaluation events where umpires can showcase their abilities for free. We're going to Elizabeth in February. We're going to Allentown in February. We're going to be going to Maryland that next month as well. The dates to be determined. But we're going into all these areas to evaluate and see what kind of product is there. If we have to tweak some guys, we will, and we'll train them to the best of our ability. But we want the very best umpires in those areas to work the very best amateur baseball in the country.
How would you say the response has been? Obviously, Perfect Game is a well-known brand. You're reaching out to territories and areas that you have had no previous contact with, and despite with the assist of social media and things like that. What kind of reception have you had? Do you feel you're reaching a point where you're going to be able to staff all these games?
Well, yeah, that's my responsibility, and the important part, I've sort of leaned on Perfect Game's name a little bit because while guys in Allentown, Pennsylvania might not know who John Gallante is or who Tri-State Elite Umpires Association is, if you haven't been living under a rock for 20 years, you know who Perfect Game is. So with the title of Perfect Game, and umpiring director for Perfect Game in the Northeast, has been credibility, has been the ability to get guys' attention, and sort of they understand the fact that if you want to work the best games available, well, this is it. You don't have to drive to Vineland, New Jersey anymore, or Atlantic City, New Jersey anymore just to work these events. We're now coming to your area, and it's time to jump on board so you can be the best umpire you can be by umpiring the best baseball available.
John, if umpires who are hearing this for the first time and have an interest in getting involved with Perfect Game, what do they do?
Yeah, if you haven't heard about it yet, and this is the first time you're hearing it, we've set up events in all of these areas where Perfect Game is expanding to, so umpires have the opportunity to showcase their ability, meet me and the staff, to get on the radar, to be selected to work these events. Go to our website in the link below to sign up and register for the location and the event specific to your area.
John, the first question comes in from a gentleman who describes himself as an aging umpire. He says, John, I'm an aging umpire who just turned 65 years old, and I'm entering into my 34th season of umpiring. I have noticed over the years that my foot speed has been decreasing, and with that, I don't have much room for error in so-called reading plays. How do you compensate on the basis for the lack of foot speed with older umpires?
Good question. First of all, congrats on your 34 years in umpiring. That's quite an accomplishment. I hope I'm still doing it at 65. But it's a common problem with umpires of any age, but it becomes more important when you have mobility issues, either due to age or you're overweight or whatever the case may be. But the solution is to continue to work on anticipating basically where the baseball is going to be. A good example of it would be if you're in A position, so you're starting behind first base, which is the farthest point you're going to have to travel, and a batter hits a ball into the gap. A guy who can run, maybe let's say a leadoff guy, a speedy runner, hits a ball into the gap, and this is looking like a triple. A lot of umpires at this point will get kind of lazy as they cut into the diamond and start to hang around second base. But if I realize that this speedy runner is approaching second base and the ball is still rolling around in the outfield, I need to continue to move towards third base in anticipation of where the play is going to be, not where the play is right now. Okay. The ball's in the outfield. We can have a tendency to be lazy and sort of camp out near second base and start to hedge our bets between second and third. But as we lose that foot speed, we sort of have to make better reads, anticipate where the ball is going to be, and start to go a little bit more prematurely than a younger, more flight-of-foot guy would. I know when I make a mistake right now, I'm only 28, so I have some time to recover. I got some foot speed to recover when I make a mistake in reading a play. Guys that are older or guys that are overweight who don't move very well are going to have to make better reads and anticipate sooner than maybe I have to.
Our second question is, how do you maintain professionalism pre- and post-game without appearing to be rude or standoffish? And before you actually answer that, this question has a personal interest to me, because I happen to be, as you know, a very friendly person who likes to talk to everybody.
I've heard.
And I'm going to have to really pay close attention. And so, take it away.
Yeah, your game assignment on a Sunday morning is not your part of your campaign for mayor. It's really important that you maintain professionalism. And let's take it a step further than, let's say, men's league baseball on a Sunday morning. If you're being evaluated by umpire evaluators who are looking for guys to go to the next level, the evaluation process starts from the moment you walk in the gate. And generally at these higher levels, it's a warning track going around the entire field. You step foot on that warning track, your evaluation has begun. So if you're a guy who's going to step onto that warning track and make a beeline for the home dugout to kiss babies and shake hands,
no, I'm not going to kiss babies and shake hands, and I apologize to the babies and to those hands.
I'm leaving the evaluation before I ever see you call a pitch, because that's not the kind of guy we want at the next level. So you should be making a beeline only to the plate for the ground rules plate meeting, maintaining polite and professional but short discussions with people who greet you along the way. Be professional, but be short in terms of not elongating these conversations based on your responses. Get to the plate meeting, go through it professionally, and then you're fine for the whole game, and then we get to the end of the game, right, which is where I think a lot of guys, including yourself, may struggle in sort of removing yourself from the situation. Once the final out is made, and I'll speak on behalf of myself if I'm the plate official. So we've got 7 baseballs in our bag. The routine ground ball to shortstop is the final out of the game. As soon as my partner calls that runner out at first base, I'm taking the 7 baseballs out of my bag. I'm dropping them where I'm standing, and we're making a beeline for the nearest exit. If along the way to the exit I have people saying, "Nice game, John," "Nice game, Blue," whatever they may say, I'll say thank you. If they put their hand out to shake it, I will shake it. But I'm going to continue to move towards the exit. And that's really the only way to make sure we're maintaining professionalism and doing our job in exiting the field as quickly as possible after the game is over.
So what is what about, you don't want to create the impression that you're being abrupt. You just want to make a...
I could see how it could come across that way, but the reasoning behind it, and you got to stay with me here on this, because most of these situations are probably friendly. They're probably, there's nothing probably wrong with the interaction between you and whoever's talking to you. But there's going to be a time where you're hanging around, and let's say you get in line with the players and want to shake their hands, and somebody has an issue with you from that day. So when you fill out an incident report, and you'd say, after the game was over, I was shaking hands in line with the players, and somebody said, bleep, 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 and I threw them out. My first question to you is, why were you still on the field? Mm-hmm. Why weren't you at your car already? And as pleasant as some of these conversations may be, some of them are going to take a turn for the worst, and the truth is you shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. So you just being there is putting you at fault. And also, especially pregame, you could be giving off the impression that maybe you're too familiar with a particular player on a particular team, and then all of a sudden we have a very close call in the 4th inning, and everybody's memory goes right back to that little too friendly meeting as you walked on the field. So there are no positives to it for us. Trust me, if somebody wants to tell you they did a good job, they'll let you know as you're leaving the field, and they'll let me know as an assigner via email.
I'm reminded as you speak of a situation that we had last year locally when I was actually umpiring one of your games, and the opposing coach noticed me speaking with you, just on a friendly basis, of course, before the game. So he assumed, therefore, that I was a personal friend of yours, and at that point, he thought every call was going to go your way.
Well, I go back to, and there's going to be varying degrees of this sort of coming back to bite us, but nothing positive can come of it. Schmoozing with the away coach before the game, there is no positive that can come out of that for you as an umpire. After the game, they should be saying, where did the umpires go? I wanted to tell him great job. Well, he's already at his car, halfway undressed, and he's ready to go. Yeah. Bad things happen after games end and in parking lots. Get your stuff, get off the field, get in your car, and go home.
Right. Great advice. I will be a new person this year.
Hopefully so.
Question number 3. What are some tips on calling and recognizing balks?
Well, this is an area of struggle for umpires in varying skill level and experience levels. A lot of umpires have the tendency to feel like if they don't catch it early, if they don't catch the balk in time, that they should just let the balk go. Now, we'd love to call all balks as soon as they happen, but if something happened that is definitely a balk.
You think the third base...
Huge jump. No, that's a ball.
Oops.
You should call it regardless of if the pitch was already delivered or maybe you caught it a little late. A balk is a balk is a balk. We're here to enforce the rules. That's number 1. Number 2 is the way we teach it to cadets, and maybe it is not thought of this way, is if something looks particularly weird on the mound, it's probably a balk or it's likely a balk. That doesn't mean you should call it, but that should start to tip you off to recognizing unnatural behavior on the mound that's not within the guidelines of the rules. Mm-hmm. But also, all right, this is a very three-pronged answer. You can't call a balk if you're not prepared to explain why exactly it was a balk. If there's a call in baseball that has to be explained more often than balks, I'm not familiar with it. You call a balk at any level, and particularly lower levels, you call a balk, you're going to have to explain yourself. So if you're going to call one, you better have a response ready to go that is coherent and short and to the point that someone will understand. Right. And if you stay on your toes when you're evaluating the pitcher in his set position and you sort of start to evaluate when something looks unnatural and you can explain it, that's when you'll start to be able to recognize them and call them.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Last question that we received. How do you know when to eject someone?
And here's Lou.
This could be the one.
There it is.
Okay. This is simpler than you think, okay? We tell our umpires all the time, we're not making the decision on ejecting somebody. The coach is going to make that decision on his own. Here's the boxes we have to check, okay? We allow coaches to ask questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to explain ourselves and what we saw. So if a coach has a question, we will be glad to answer it as long as it relates to the play that just happened and the baseball game. Okay, so if we're in the 5th inning and you think I blew a call at second base, we are not going to discuss whatever happened in the 3rd inning that you may have disagreed with. So your question has to be related to the play that just happened. Okay, this isn't my 3rd missed call of the day. This is the one play right now you want to talk about. That's okay. We can discuss that. The coaches don't repeat themselves. Okay, as long as they don't repeat themselves, we'll continue to entertain them in this conversation and give as much information as we can. And 3, as long as the conversation doesn't get personally offensive. So the term "you" followed by anything negative is probably something that's going to reach ejection levels. So "you suck" is an ejection. That call sucked is not an ejection. Okay? The difference is one's personal, one's about the call. Okay? Once coaches repeat themselves, our guys are instructed to start to shut the conversation down. You've already said that, I understand. We've got to move on. All right? They're not bringing any new information to the mix, so we start to have to move on. If they continue to repeat themselves, that's when we'll enter the warning stage. We talked last podcast about warning without warning. That's enough. That's when that phrase starts to come out. So if you check all the boxes along the way and you make sure you do your job as an umpire in this discussion, you're not going to end up with any what we call bad ejections. Bad ejections are ejections where they weren't particularly deserved. So allow coaches to speak. When they cross that line in the sand and you need to start to recognize what that line is, that's when ejections start.
And now we're going to one of our favorite segments of the week, the Wildcard Sports Question of the Week, brought to you by the Scanzano Sports Center, located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
The Scanzano Sports Center is a state-of-the-art 40,000 square foot indoor sports facility conveniently located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The Scanzano Sports Center is home to Combat Baseball, one of the fastest-growing travel baseball programs in the country. Whether you are looking for specialized instruction, a premier facility to work out in, or to try the brand new pitching laboratory, the Scanzano Sports Center has you covered. To visit them on the web, please visit scanzanosports.com.
How do you handle this particular unusual situation? As described in the email, it was a late game in the evening, under the lights, and in the middle of a double play, the lights went out suddenly. We had runners on first and second with one out. A ground ball was hit to the first baseman, who then pivoted to throw to the shortstop covering second base. And as he was releasing the ball, the lights went out. No one saw the ball. We later found out that the ball wound up in the outfield because no one saw it clear enough to catch. What do you do? How do you handle a situation like that where the lights went out and all of a sudden you're in the dark and nobody knows what happened?
Yeah, if this happens to you, it's not really your day as an umpire. So the way I understand it is the ball obviously went into left field because nobody could see it. My first suggestion to this said umpire is to get ready for some ejections. Just be prepared for some people to be very upset with the outcome of this play, because probably what the defensive coach thought was going to be an inning-ending double play is not quite going to be that. So we can't assume outs as umpires. So when wacky stuff like this happens, really bizarre situations that aren't covered in rule books and things like that, we have to put runners back where they came from or only advance them one base. So with that ball, we can't assume that out at second was going to take place, and we certainly can't assume the out at second was going to take place and the out at first was going to take place. So your only line of logic to take is the runner from second goes to third, the runner going from first to second stays at second, and the batter runner gets first base. So when the lights come on, if they do come back on, you're going to have bases loaded with one out, and the defensive coach is probably going to be ejected
If he's giving you a hard time.
I would imagine.
Yeah. But I thought that was kind of...
that's a weird one.
That's
a weird one. I wouldn't play the lottery if you get that one.
That's what we call a wild card type question, and we'll probably try to have one of those at the end of every podcast. And with that in mind, I just want to thank everybody for taking time to watch Behind the Mask, and stay tuned. We'll be back next week and for another brand new show. So thank you very much.
I'm glad I'm friendly with Angelo Cataldi, who invites me on real shows.
It's a real show.